Hello, and welcome to our Building Resilience in Kinship Families workshop. We're so excited that you've taken the time out of this whirlwind that you're living in right now to get some tips and to learn something about how to take care of these children that you have brought into your home. Raising family members' children can be a very difficult situation and can cause stress in your life. It's important to control that stress both for you and for the child's health and well-being. Children who have been removed from their families have a traumatic experience, and oftentimes their behavior is difficult as they process the loss and the trauma. And your stress can be triggered as you do the diligent job of meeting their needs. And it's not always met with positive behavior from the children, and sometimes even from extended family. Being open to communicating and to developing and strengthening the protective factors will help your children and help you to build resilience and to be able to manage stress as it comes into your life as you take care of these amazing children that you have chosen to care for. My name is Susan Baca, and I've been training prospective foster parents for about 13 years now. I have a deep understanding, love, and respect for kinship families. I still remember that Friday afternoon after Thanksgiving when we received the call that our nephew was in trouble because of the addictions of his family. That phone call turned our lives upside down, changed the course of where we were going and all the plans that we had made. We were introduced to family drama, to behaviors, and to addictions that were brought right into our home. We did, however, get to see the big rewards of that as we helped this young man develop to be able to reach his potential despite the difficulties that were created from his parents' addiction. And now he's an amazing son, a wonderful father, and a fantastic husband. Joining me today are two amazing trainers who also train prospective families. They also have had kinship experiences that are unique to each of them. And I'd like to introduce them to you now. Jackie?
Hi, my name is Jackie Burt, and I have fostered for 17 years. And I have two experiences with kinship care. And I have a different take on it because with my fostering of kin, I did not have the state involved. And so I have a different perspective that I'm really going to share with you tonight. My first opportunity was when I was 21 and just newly married. My husband and I took on his little brother who was 9 years old. And not having brothers of my own or any experience with parenting or boys, it was an interesting road for us. And I'll share some more of that as I get into my section. But I also took in, fast forward 30 years later, a niece and a nephew who were teenagers and the experience I had with that. And then I'll share what that journey looked like a little bit and then how it ended, and as well as we'll talk about some other protecting factors that we'll get to. So,
Thank you, Jackie. And Cassie?
My name is Cassie. I've been a foster parent for about 10 years now, and I get to mentor and train new foster parents, which I love. We actually started out our journey with my niece, who was an infant at the time. It was a unique situation because I am the oldest of 5 children, and the sister whose child I cared for was the youngest. So it was an interesting family dynamic, and needless to say, it definitely kind of shook some things around and brought out maybe some angst and some hard feelings, and really tested our family bonds. We came close to adoption, but she did end up reunifying, and it was a lot of highs and a lot of very, very low lows, and definitely changed who I am and how I approach people and the world and my own family. So definitely the hardest thing we've ever chosen to do, but the most wonderful too, the most fulfilling, and yeah, I love it.
Thank you, Cassie.
Yeah.
So parenting for the first time, or for a lot of us the second time around, can throw us off balance when we spend a disproportionate amount of time caring for the needs of kids who have experienced this trauma and neglecting our own needs. Whenever we get on the airplane, the flight stewardess instructs us to put the oxygen mask on our face first and then help the people around us. If you don't have enough oxygen to help the kids around you, that's going to lead to some real burnout and stress situations. Trying to care for the needs of others without enough oxygen will lead to burnout, stress, fatigue, health problems, and sometimes even mental health problems. So remember, self-care is not a luxury, it's a necessity as you make this conscious choice to take these kids on so that you can help them heal. So now we're going to talk about some protective factors that will help you remember to self-care and to help you as you care for these children. Jackie?
Okay, thank you, Susan. We're going to talk about protective factors, and 4 of them specifically tonight. And so the first one is parent resilience, and that is being strong even when you're stressed, and what that looks like. And then the second one will be social connections, getting and giving support. And then knowledge, willing to learn new strategies in parenting, and we'll talk about why that's important, and concrete support in times of need. And so I really love this session because I didn't have these protective factors when I fostered my husband's little brother. Again, he was 9 years old, and I didn't have anybody coming in that I could talk to. I didn't have that support and stuff like that. And so I want to point out some things that having the state involved really is a bonus. I would have given anything now, looking back, knowing what I know now, to have had them involved to help with this. And so this really interests me, and it really it speaks to me. And so we'll go on with there. And the first thing I want to do is remind you that you're doing something really hard, but you're doing the best you can, right? The kids are safe, and they're getting their needs met. So understand that and give yourself some grace, and go from there as we talk about these things. We're not doing it to say, oh, I'm not doing enough. But what we're doing is we're building on it, right? You wanted to make them safe. You brought them into your home, right? So now why would you stop there, right? You want to learn some new skills that will continue to help those children. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And to me, resilience is, like you said, being strong even when you're stressed, when things are chaotic and things like that. So what does resilience look like to you guys? I mean, what in your experience of doing kinship care, what does it look like?
Well, for me, it was in those times when my little guy was melting down, and he was doing that until he was 16, 17, sometimes even today. But when he was melting down and I was feeling like I wasn't enough, that I wasn't going to be able to help him, to really remember that it wasn't personal, that the way he was behaving really was about what he'd experienced and how he was processing those emotions, and that my job was to be able to help him through those emotions and then help him to use his skills to be able to process and appropriately express those emotions. So someone told me it was all about the Q-tip. Quit taking it personally.
Yep.
And when I switched then, it was a big deal for me.
I really appreciate that, Susan, because I really feel like if we understand that those children, when they come into our home and we see these behaviors, if they were in my home or your home, they'd still have the same behavior. So it's really not about me,
Right.
and it's not about you. It's about what they're going through and what they're dealing with and how they're processing and stuff. And so it isn't personal to us; it's very personal to them.
Exactly.
And so understanding that, because then it's easier to handle those things, to survive those meltdowns and things like that. So I love that. Thank you.
Jackie, I'd like to add one more thing to that too. What the other thing I found out is there was no timeline. It's not in 6 months this is going
Right.
to be over, or in 2 years this is going to be over. That things happen, triggers happen, and again, that wasn't my fault. It was the experience.
Mhm.
Right. Very good. Appreciate that.
That's good.
So let's do a skill building exercise really quick, you guys. So I want you to imagine that your niece has just moved in with you and she keeps yelling at you. I hate you. She's missing her mom. She wants to be with her mom, but she's with you. And she says, I hate you. I hate living here. This place makes me sick. So what could you do to foster resilience in a situation like this? What do you think?
I think something that I would do to help support her and myself I would probably encourage her to express how she feels, because it's okay to feel what she's feeling and to be upset and to be sad and to be angry even. I would apologize for just the fact that she's feeling that way. I know it's not my fault. I know it's not her fault, so I'm not going to lay blame anywhere, but I'm going to let her know it's okay and that I am sorry that she's feeling these things. I'm going to encourage her to have positive outlets. Let's write mom a letter. Let's draw her a picture. Let's talk about, the good things that we love about her, because kids tend to hear a lot of the bad in these situations. So we need to hear the good too. We need to remember that mom loves you. Mom wants good for you. We need to remember all those things. We need to talk about it. And we just need to give kids that safe space to feel what they're feeling, and free from judgment, free from, you have to act this way or else. Because if you draw that line in the sand, they will step up to it. So you got to just give them that safe space.
And over it.
Absolutely. They will dance right over it with a smile on their face. So
I appreciate it, Cassie. I love how you are validating how she feels. It doesn't really matter what I think. If I think, oh, that's a stupid feeling, or you shouldn't feel that way because she did this to you, it doesn't matter.
Right.
What matters is what she's feeling and allowing her to feel that and validating that. And I so appreciate that. I think that it speaks volumes. And I think also going along with that, have you ever had a bad day at work and you came home, like a really bad day at work, and you came home like, ugh, and you walk in the door and you're like kicking your dog, yelling at your kids. Our kids have bad days.
Mm-hmm.
And they react and they say things like, I hate you. You're not my mother. If I had a quarter for every time I heard that in 17 years of foster care, we'd be having a party. So, it just is. It's part of the process, and allowing them to feel and stuff, and allowing them to separate if they need to calm down, because I have to take a break sometimes. I have to step away. And so I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Cassie.
Absolutely.
So let's move on to the second protective factor that we want to talk about, and that's social connections. This one's really important, and sometimes I think this one gets lost. We need a network of support where we feel respected and appreciated. You had that before the children came. You had things that you did that made you feel good. It fed your soul. And you've got to continue to feed your soul, especially now that you have now moved trauma, grief, and loss into your home. And it takes over. It can take over. And so you really have to take care of yourself along this line. When I had my husband's little brother, again, I was 21. I was so young and naive, and I just didn't know what I didn't know. And I was alone. We were newly married. We moved to Hawaii. So it was a totally different community, culture. And so I felt very isolated and very alone. And a lot of times when you take kinship in, you have family members who are really there for you and stuff. I did not have that. When I asked a question like, hey, I am having trouble with this, they all went like, well, you can't send it back. You can't send it back. And so I'm like, I just want help. I'm not sending it back. I just want help. And so I didn't have that family support. So I was really isolated in this community of all this newness. And my father had just passed. I had so much going on. And generally, isn't that how it happens? It never happens when it's convenient. I don't have anything going on, so this is a great time to take in a kiddo, right? And so I appreciate them recognizing that we have to have those supports. And so I relied a lot on people from, like a minister or clergy. That brought me comfort. And then baseball moms, he was very into sports, and so I put him in sports because I could rest for 2 or 3 hours during a game. No kidding. This was a line of sight 24-hour-a-day kid. And so, and I learned so much with those baseball moms, and they didn't even know, because I sat around with them and I'd listen to what they said, and I'm like, 15 years younger than them, and they would talk about things. I think, oh, that's normal behavior. Okay, that's not him hating me or whatever, because I didn't know what was what. Right. And so I really appreciated that community. They had no idea the support they were to me. And I had this one lady at my church who got me. And she would come and say, why don't I pick him up and have a play date at my house, because she had children around his age. And that was so helpful. So connections are so important. Yeah. So what do strong social connections look like for you in your experience?
Well, for me, it was recognizing that I couldn't do it all by myself. I had raised children. I did it successfully. I worked full time. But my little guy's behaviors and things were different, and I felt like I couldn't ask for help. I felt like that people would be worried that I couldn't take care of him, and I was very protective. And I felt that my neighbors and friends wouldn't understand his behaviors and be able to handle them. So I think one of the most important things that I learned was to say yes to help. There's nothing that's going to happen in an hour that is going to be a difficult thing for my little guy, and we could handle it after that. But it was important for me to have lunch with a friend, or to do a hobby, or sometimes it was watch a movie, just to be able to do something that would fill me and get me away from the situation. And sometimes it was really good for him too, to be able to connect with other people, because it really does take a village for us to be able to help these kids.
It's so important to have those connections and to stay. You had friends before, and now you need to continue those friends. And here's the beautiful thing about going through the first program, being licensed in the state, which I didn't have, which would have been so helpful, is you probably have already been assigned your RPM, your Resource Peer Mentor. Someone called you or sent you a text or an email and said, hey, I am your mentor, or your RPM. And so get that person's name, put it on your fridge, and don't lose it. They're wonderful. What it is it's seasoned foster parents like us who have just done it longer. We don't have all the answers, but we've been around the block a little bit, and we know people who do have answers. So if you call me and I'm your mentor, if I don't have the answers, I'm going to call somebody who does, and I'm going to help you. I'm going to find something. Or if you need to call and just vent because I need to talk you off the ledge, I can do that too. I'm probably going to, if it's me, I'm probably going to make you laugh because, and you're going to go, why are you laughing? But it is funny because you got to laugh, you got to cry, right?
Yep.
But that's what we're there for. We're just there to be support because you're not alone. And I want you to hear that as you walk through this journey of kinship. You're not alone. And if you feel like you're alone, then you need to reach out to people. And I love how you said that you were afraid of what people would think. They're my family, I should take care of them myself. I don't need to go to one of the local closets and get clothing. I don't need vouchers. Okay, it's not about your needs, and it's not about my ego. It's about what my child needs and what I can provide for them. I would have loved to have had a monthly stipend or clothing given to me for my kiddo or things like that. We were newly married, we had no money. It would have been nice. And then as I got to older and I did the teenagers, that would have really been helpful as well because their demands were even higher.
Right.
And stuff. And so, there's so much value there. It's very rich. And immerse yourself in that. Open yourself to that and see what it looks like. Because I think that you'll find that it feels good. People are helping, people care, and you're a part of a community. And I think that's a really big thing, to feel like you're not alone and not isolated.
And Jackie, I think sometimes we as caregivers feel like we can't reach out to the department because the department has the ability to move a child.
Yeah.
They don't want to move a child. They know the importance of that family connection. And so as long as it's safe and you're reaching out to get the help you need, then they're encouraged and excited to hear from you and to take advantage of those resources that they have.
Right. And if you're struggling to reach out to the department, again, your RPM is a great resource because we've had a lot of goings on with the department, so we can help you with, this caseworker is great at texting, or follow up with an email if you haven't heard back in a week, or whatever it may be. So again, the Resource Peer Mentor, we are a great.
And the one last thing that we didn't talk about is the people you're going through your first training with. You're going to have other kinship families you're going to meet. You need to change numbers and stay in touch. So when I went through training here in Idaho, there was a young lady in there. She's a school teacher and she had no children. She was single. And so she and I traded, and we ended up being friends, but we only talked when we had placements. Because otherwise we really didn't have a lot in common. But when we had placements, we were definitely an aid to each other. And it was somewhere to go and to talk and stuff because we understood the confidentiality, things like that. And so it really was a benefit. So be sure and reach out to each other and network with each other, because that is another great resource. Because you're going to know each other's stories. You're going to have spent time together through this training. And so I would really advise you to try and do that.
Yeah.
So let's go on and let's talk about protective factor number 3. And this is knowledge. Sometimes this one can be a little hard to swallow, and I love that you've already kind of touched on it, Susan. When we're parenting children that have experienced loss and trauma and separation. My natural children that I gave birth to, they didn't deal with any of that. So I got my adopted kids, or my foster kids and then adopted, They did. And so my parenting of how I did the first two did not work with the last three. I had to learn some new skills. And that's what it is. It's not that I was doing it wrong.
Yeah.
It's that I needed to learn how to do it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want you to understand that when you hear something you think, well, I did that in my kids and they turned out great. That's awesome. No one's saying it's wrong. What we're saying, though, is children with trauma have to be parented differently. They have to be, because they're hurting, and we need to be able to help them. We want to heal them, right? It's back to what I said. You brought them into your home to protect them. It can't stop there. Now we have to do more. We have to be able to parent them in a way that is healing. And so let's talk about that, because that's the one thing we're all the same. Growing good humans who grow up to be good adults, that hasn't changed throughout time.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to do. And it just looks different with children who've experienced trauma. So what does this look like? So we need to be resilient and learn new child development parenting strategies so we can parent these children more effectively. So what does being willing to learn new parenting skills, what strategies, what does that look like? Cassie, what can you share?
So I think that means being willing to listen to people that have been there before. I think it means being willing and open to the many trainings that the department offers, that we as foster parents offer. I think it means just knowing, again, like Jackie said, that just because you did it this way once and it worked, it may not work this time. So you need to be open to hearing other perspectives. And that perspective may also come from that child themselves. They may have something to say that I need you to talk to me this way, or I need you to approach me this way. I would really benefit from, this, whatever it may be. So you just need to be transparent and malleable when it comes to how you're going to approach things.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. I like the thought too that, understanding. So my husband is playful, and so he always does this thing where he winds his wrist up and says, I'm gonna punch you. And he's learned that he can't do that with our children when they come in. It's such a simple, benign thing, and he does other things like that where he's physical with them and stuff. And so he's had to learn to pull that back. It doesn't mean that it's wrong.
Right.
It just means that this child can't process that. And your child may not have that issue, but there may be other things. And that's just one example to kind of figure out, okay, this is not something I can do with this child because they have issues of being hit, so he can't play like that with them. Right. And so understanding what your child's been through, and you may not know all of it up front. Some of it you learn as you go. We become detectives when we become foster families, right? Even through kinship. And so just understanding that the previous ways that you have taught or disciplined in the past might be different now. And again, it's not because you did it wrong, it's just because different skills are needed, okay? And so I appreciate that. Let's do another skill building exercise. So I want you to imagine that your niece, your cousin, your grandchild has behaviors that you don't remember ever seeing with the children that you've raised. So you're shocked by what you see, and you're not sure how to respond, and you find yourself angry and frustrated. So this one I have to say I can own. With my little brother, my little brother-in-law, I was in a constant, for 3 years, I was constantly frustrated and very angry and just sad. I cried a lot those first 3 years, and I thought there's something wrong with me because I didn't understand the extent, because I didn't have access to trauma training and things like that. So what can you share that from your experience of what that looks like?
I forgot the question already. I'm so sorry. I was like,
okay.
What was the question?
Okay, so I'll read it again.
That's
so,
okay.
Imagine that your niece or cousin or grandchild has behaviors that you've just never seen before. Your children never experienced anything like that, and you're shocked by some of the behaviors you've seen. Ever seen anything shocked you?
Yep.
Yeah. Welcome to foster parenting. When you've had your first shocking experience, you're one of us.
It's the initiation.
Right. That's right. It is. So you're shocked by some of the behaviors that you see, and you're not sure how to respond, and you find that you're angry and you're frustrated a lot. So what can you do? How can you foster resilience in this?
I think something that you can do to foster resilience in these really tough situations is learn your own triggers. Learn, okay, if that child raises their voice to me or maybe says certain things to me, I'm automatically triggered and stressed out. You need to learn what those things are for yourself so that you know what your reaction is going to be ahead of time, because for instance, disrespect is my trigger, and I take in teenagers, so it's a constant trigger. So I'm constantly, presented with the opportunity to work on this. So I know that if something is said, I don't want to respond in anger. I want to take a moment and process it myself, because I'm in that survival brain myself, going back to my own hard things. And instead of just responding, I want to think through it and remember that relationship with this child is what I want at the end of the day. I want to preserve and grow that relationship. So what my response needs to be something rooted in love and understanding and compassion. So knowing my own triggers, I would say, is something that I really can do to prevent more damage down the road.
I appreciate that. That's really good. I also think that getting opportunities to learn. If there's trainings that are offered, because you're going to be offered this constantly, support group training, things like that. Go to those, because you're going to learn some things, because you're drinking from a fire hose when you're going through first training. You're hearing all these new things and everything, and then once you get through and we start having trainings, like once a month or every other month, wherever you live, depending, you start to remember more, and you're like, oh, I remember that from the first training. And so you can start to apply those things. It's a refresh and reminder, and then some new things too. And you can let them know, I am really struggling with this behavior. Can we do a training on that? Reach out to your people, your RPM, and tell them that's what you're looking for, and they can take it to the people that organize that, and they can help you out with that. So, and there's lots of online things that we can refer you to, and you're going to have other trainings that you have access to, and so there's a lot of resources out there for that. But I thought that I just want to, the things that you see sometimes you're not intuitive. My child falls down and busts their knee and they're crying. It's intuitive in me to go pick them up, kiss that boo-boo, put a Band-Aid on it. My child throws a full-out rubber band on the floor in the middle of Walmart or McDonald's. I don't have intuition for that. When my 9-year-old brother-in-law took a knife to the back of our leather seats in our car, intuitively, I didn't know what to do with that. And so I needed to learn new skills and how to handle that without losing my cool. Because see, that wasn't what makes a 9-year-old do that, right? So we want to go after the behavior. We're going to talk so much about that. What's causing that versus focusing so much on the discipline. There were consequences, but really, what makes a kid do that? And that's what we need to get to, because once we address that, then we don't have this. And so I had to learn new skills to do that, because that was not intuitive. And so we really have to be aware. And so thank you. I appreciate that, Cassie, so much. Our final protective factor, number 4, is concrete support in times of need. Becoming an instant parent may create financial or other hardships. And it's a sign of strength to recognize when you need help and to reach out and get it. A lot of times, people think that if they ask for help that they're weak, or people will think bad of them, or or they want to be strong and I can do this myself, I can figure this out, and maybe you can, maybe you can't, but you don't have to struggle like that when there's help provided. And so what is accepting support in times of need? What does that look like for you and you guys' experience?
Well, for me, it was just really taking the time to identify myself. What do I need? Lots of times I'd have people say, how can I help you? And I was at a loss. I didn't know. I didn't know what I needed, because I was so much in survival mode. So taking that time to really think through, as Cassie said, get my emotions under control. What do I need? What help do I need? What do I understand? What am I missing here? And who can I bring in to help me with that? The training that you were talking about, there's so much. Online stuff. We have foster parent college that you can do immediate kinds of things of training that is just personal to what you're going through right then. As you go through first, there's the right time trainings. So if you need it right now, and relying on those resource peer mentors, relying on people who understand what you're going through. Sometimes our friends don't understand, and they're more of, why are you putting yourself through this? You don't need to do that. And that's not as helpful as we need. So for me, it was first identifying what I needed, looking at the resources, and not waiting till I was in the crisis. Because in the crisis, it has to be intuitive, like Jackie said. And that I had to create for myself in this situation.
I like that. I love that you brought that last point up. Just don't wait till you're burnt out. Don't wait until you're like, I can't do this anymore. You know?
Right.
When you start to feel this, you need help, that's when let us come in and walk with you through this. And the final point I want to make here about accepting support in times of need is understand too that there's a thing called respite that you'll learn about as we go through your first training. And that is where you can get some relief. The child can go and spend the night or even just a few hours during the day. And that what that looks like, you can work with your caseworker and you can also work with the RPM to see if you can find someone. But here's the thing, when it's kin, it's very hard because we feel guilty. Like I can do this, or he'll feel like I don't love him. At least I did. I felt like, but when he was gone, when he would go and play with my friend that came and got him at church, I was like, oh, I would go home and take a bubble bath, or I would take a nap because I could sleep relaxed because I didn't have to be on and stuff. And so, it fills your soul. And that's what I'm saying again. If you're not taking care of yourself, it's very hard to continue to take care of them. It really, and to do it, you can continue, but it's hard to do it in a happy and joyful way. And there will be times when it's hard, but it doesn't have to be unhappy. I've been happy a lot of times but it's been a struggle as well at the same time. And so we just want you to know, again, back to this, you're not alone. You can be happy. There is help. And you're going to hear a lot more about these resources and stuff that we're talking about. We're kind of whetting your appetite today so that you begin to look into these items and stuff, because most of you will already have your placement in your home right now. So let's do one more skill building exercise, and this is, let's talk about what it looks like to have support. So this one, it says you're retired, you're living on a fixed income, and that's been sufficient for your needs, but now you've taken in 4 grandchildren. Ooh. And so you weren't expecting it. Yeah, you do that. Woo! Your support network has shrunk since becoming a parent again, and you have little time to do yourself since you cannot afford childcare. In addition, your monthly expenditures exceed your income, which is causing financial stress. So how can you build a support system to help you with these financial stressors? What's your experience?
I think that it's really important to, especially with 4 different kids, right? Chances are they will be hopefully involved in certain things, learn who their village is, that they will likely become your village as well. If they're in baseball, if they're in dance, if they stay after school, to do homework club or something like that. Learn who their people are and get to know them. If you're struggling, if you're on a fixed income and it's financially hard and it's taxing emotionally and mentally, which with 4 grandchildren it would be, just look for those natural resources. If they're involved in school, if they're involved in sports, just talk to the counselor, talk to local friends that you might have and see if they're, you can get donations of clothes, or if you can, just kind of wrap around in that way and let people help you. Again, like the girl said, let people support you because they want to. If people are asking, it's because they want to serve you in that way. And it fills their cup. And we're talking about filling our cup and, feeding your soul. That may feed their soul. So let them do that for you. So
I think it's important to be aware of what financial assistance has come through that the child is in foster care. There's so many things that the kids can qualify for.
Yeah.
So having a good conversation with your social worker and being honest with them about what that financial situation is and making sure that you are taking advantage of all of those. The other thing that I found is that people are very supportive of foster children, and if you have a camp you need to go to, don't be afraid to ask. There is such a support system, and that we probably could help you get that through some of those different programs and through people who want to support. So it doesn't hurt to ask,
right?
And if you don't ask, nobody knows. Right. And so being really honest and taking advantage of all of those in your community.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just don't be embarrassed that, I think I can't afford whatever, because that money's not going to go to some other child because you didn't claim it.
Right.
It's in the bank, it's set for them, and that's their money. And so it's there for them.
Yeah.
It's not about what you can or can't provide for them. It's about what they're entitled to, because the state wants to take care of them. They want to care for them. And so I appreciate that. And be sure to talk to someone. You know, if it's open with your partner, talk about that. And I like what you said too about learning what resources are out there. You know, our kids qualify for free lunch.
Yep.
Our children go on WIC. They're on Medicaid. I mean, there's so many things out there that can really relieve stress and burden. There's closets in some of your areas where you can go in and get free clothing for the children. And it's nice. It's nice clothing. It's not like a thrift shop. And so knowing that those things are available, go in and do that. We love when kitchen families come in and utilize this. It's really good. And we really appreciate that. We love to bring you into the fold and love on you and hear your stories and talk with you. So we just, again, like she said, talk with your caseworker, your RPM, find out what's out there, and especially if your child has a need. I know I do teenagers as well, and I had a couple of boys playing football, and it got right down the wire. So I met the caseworker at the signing in because she had to bring me the voucher to pay for them to play football. So the state covered that. And so, you know, we can make things happen, and they're creative, and caseworkers care about these kids. They really want to help them, and they want to help yours, and they want to help mine. And so they go the extra mile sometimes to really get those things done. So have faith in them.
And Jackie, I think caseworkers care about you too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't do this work if you weren't there stepping up and going the extra mile to change your plan and the road that you were on so that you can care for these kids.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're kin and you stepped up, I mean, that really says a lot. But they love to place children with family. It's huge, keeping that family unit structured together. So we're going to end here. And so I just want to recap a little bit that, you know, remember that you're doing your best. They're safe. Their needs are getting met. We're just going to learn some new skills to do even better. And so you're going to create a network of support, be open to new parenting skills, because remember, we're working with children with trauma and loss. And so it requires just a few different things and some education on that part to serve them well, to help them with what they're going through and processing, and be strong enough to ask for help. And I wanted to conclude with just saying, I have two stories I told you about. My little brother-in-law who was 9, and he left me when he was 12, and then my teenage niece and nephew who were 16 and 15 and 17. No, I'm sorry, 16 and 17. Anyways, my little brother-in-law, when he went back home at 12, it didn't go well, and by the time he was 19, he was arrested and in prison, and he did over 20 years in prison. And he got out, and I was able to see him. In fact, I had a lot of guilt because I felt like I failed him, and so it was very hard for me to I couldn't talk about him without tearing up and getting emotional and stuff, because I felt like I had given this opportunity to do something really good in the world, and I failed. And so I went, I got a call that he had been at work. After he got out of prison, he got a job, a really good job, and he was working at a dock, and a truck backed up into him and crushed him. And he was in the trauma wing of the hospital in Nevada. And so I flew in. I knew, my mama heart knew, I had to get on a plane. I hadn't talked to him. We'd written a few letters here and there, but we had kind of separated a lot. And so I just knew I had to be there. And so I did. I went and I sat by his bed, and as every day he got progressively better. And I remember talking to him, and I said, you know, Gary, I said, I really need to apologize to you because I failed you. And he said to me, and this was the most healing thing of all, he said, you know, you have nothing to apologize for. He said, the only good memories I have in my childhood were those years I lived with you. He said, I did so much in those 3 years. And he said, you know, you did nothing but love me, and I appreciate that. And then he apologized. He goes, one year it was your birthday, and I acted like I didn't even know. And he goes, I'm really sorry about that. And I said, well, I don't even remember. So you're off the hook. You know, we both forgive each other. We're done. But that has brought healing and closure for me. And just knowing that it doesn't always. We all tried, but it didn't really work out for him because he still had his free agency, right? He still got to choose what he got to do, and he didn't make good choices. But he still has that. He's still this sweet person inside, but he's made poor choices and he's paying for them.
Yeah.
My niece and nephew, though, again, fast forwarding 30 years, I got them, and they were thrown out literally by a stepmom, and their dad didn't step up and save them, and so he chose her over them. So I took them in. I helped them graduate from high school. get married or go to college, get married, and get on their own and stuff. And now I'm their nana to their children. And they are good humans. They have great jobs. They're happily married. It's just, they've made good choices. And so sometimes it turns out and sometimes it doesn't. But you know what? It's not our fault if it doesn't. And, it just, they still have that opportunity to choose for themselves. And I just want you to understand, you're doing the best you can. And that's all you need to do, because it's a beautiful thing to be able to care for another person's child.
Yes.
And when it's family, it really is real, right? Because this isn't some strange child that they dropped off. This is someone I know and I love and I care about.
Right.
And so I want you to have hope and faith, but I also want you to be realistic and understand sometimes, it doesn't always end like we thought it would. But the bar is different for our kids because of their trauma and experiences. And so we wish you well in your journey. And now we'll turn the time back over to Susan.
Thank you, Jackie. We really appreciated your insights, and also yours, Cassie. Kathy's going to take us down the road now to look at what stress, burnout, and what is parent resilience. Cassie?
Yeah, so from what we've gathered so far, right, this is a sometimes very long and hard road, and it can definitely take its toll on you. So we need to be very cognizant of stress and burnout and what that can do to us, and the importance of being very mindful and very self-reflective of how things are affecting us, because we don't want you to get to the point where you are burnt out. We don't ever want that for you. I mean, like Jackie said, we'll definitely talk you off of a cliff if that's what you need, but we don't want you to get there. We don't want you to approach that cliff, right? So it's really important to be very aware of how things are affecting you. So girls, can you give me an example of an example of a time or a situation in your life where you felt extreme, maybe it felt insurmountable stress to you?
Well, I can. Back to my little brother-in-law, that time I thought something was wrong with me.
Right.
I was so unhappy, and so I had to get help, and so I couldn't adopt him. The family wouldn't allow it, so I couldn't get him counseling. So I thought, well, I need it. And I went into counseling, and that helped so much because I realized there was nothing wrong with me, that I was just dealing with a situation, and he didn't have a dog in the fight, and so he was able to see things a little clearer and give me some insight that I thought, oh, well, all right then. Mm-hmm. And so that really helped. That was what did it for me, was getting my own personal counseling. I couldn't do it alone. I was losing my mind. Right. And after that, when he put a label to it and told me what I was experiencing, stuff like that, I was like, oh, well, that's not terminal. I can do this. I can do this.
I love that. Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, that's it. It feels, I think, in the moment where you're going through it and trying to forge a path through the forest, right? It can probably feel like I'm never going to get to a point where I'm okay, and to feel like maybe it's your fault. That's a pretty low place to be. And so I love that you took that time to reflect, and you got counseling, and you got to a place where you could see and understand that, you know what, this isn't my fault, and I'm still going to put my best in there. And you had great self-care, because if we don't care for ourselves, we definitely can't care for children. So I love that. Thank you. That's awesome. It's really important to understand the signs early on. What were the signs that you had? Were you
crying myself to sleep every night, hating getting up in the morning? It would get to be about 3 p.m, which meant school was out, and I would start to go, I'd feel myself just getting tense, because I knew, here we go again. Yeah. Here we go. And so just little things like that. Yeah. So. Yeah.
I felt that myself. I'm sure Susan's had periods where you felt the same, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It can be very hard to dread caring for somebody that you love. That's a very devastating feeling. We don't want to get to that point. So that self-care, that self-reflection is really important. We're talking about caregiver burnout as well. And so caregiver burnout, right? It is when you get to the point where you are mentally, emotionally, physically done, exhausted, flatlined, for caring for somebody for a long period of time. And it's just sad to think about when you think of people who maybe have chronically ill relatives, right? That they are the main caregiver, and nobody is pouring into their life. Nobody is supporting them. Nobody is letting them tap out for a moment. It's very similar for kids that are dealing with trauma, that are dealing with chronic trauma, that are dealing with that constant fight, flight, or freeze. And I'm sure you guys have experienced some of that yourself already if you are caring for your family members, because being separated from your family, being apart from your parents is not natural. It's not a natural thing, and so it's going to affect them, which will then affect you. So,
and I think too, the understanding that even if we know being separated from the parent is the best thing for them,
yes,
they don't know that.
Absolutely.
And so, and we know that, oh, that was a horrible situation, but to them that was their normal. And so giving them some grace and understanding that, allowing them to feel and miss and things like that. So,
absolutely.
And I'll be really honest and raw with you, that's what happened to me was burnout. Mm-hmm. And so at the 3-year mark, I sent him home, and I wouldn't take him back because I had no one. Like I said, every time I turned to family for help or whatever, my husband was in the military and he was gone to sea all the time. So I was parenting alone with a child who hated women because all the women in his life had just dumped on him, you know? And so it was really, I just got to the point where I absolutely, without any support or help, I couldn't do it anymore. And that carries guilt. And so that's why we're saying, don't get to that point. I wish I hadn't. Right. But I didn't know where to go.
And now you know better and you do better. So we're hoping that you guys can learn from our experience, because my niece was my very first, and I had to learn the hard way with her as well, and just completely continue to pour out while never getting my own cup filled. And so it's very hard and it's very draining. And it's important not to get to the point where you are burnt out, because I mean, not only will that affect you, mentally and emotionally, but truly physically, you can get very sick. You can just be constantly feeling unrested and like there's no time out for you. There's no off. You're constantly, like Jackie said, you're constantly on. There's no relief. There's no nothing. So that's a tough spot to be in, and we don't want you to get to that point. Learning to manage your own stress, learning to know the signs is really, really important when you're caring for your family members or your kin, because if you, like the girl said earlier, if you don't care for yourself, if you don't put that oxygen mask on your own face, you're not going to be any good to anybody else. So it's really good, it's really important to make sure that you are caring for yourself before you can ever effectively care for a child.
And I think a good point here, we're talking about when it's really rough and it's really hard. Yeah. Sometimes though it's going okay, but it's still a stress. It's still extra, especially if you weren't planning on this, or if you're older and you're taking kids in now and you're done raising kids. It's still stressful, and still need to take care of yourself, because the better you are for them. And so it's not always because it's like gone down the tubes, but it's also just on a regular basis reminding you that you have to. It can't be 24/7 on the children. You have to take a few minutes in there somewhere for yourself, even in good times, so you stay in those good times.
Right, absolutely. And that's continuing that mindfulness of where you're at, doing your own check engine. Am I running green? Everything's good. Am I running orange? I'm kind of getting a little tense. I feel worn down, whatever it may be. It's really good to reflect on your own how you're handling things, and maintain as you go, and not just wait till you get to that point where I'm done. Get them out of my house. I don't ever want to do this again. So when we talk about signs and symptoms of caregiver stress, for me personally, I think the biggest things I dealt with were headaches. Fatigue is something that I constantly felt tired. And hopelessness was a big one for me. What about you girls?
For me, it wasn't so much the illnesses as it was comfort food. I was healing myself by the things that I was eating and the things that would make me feel better. I would also notice a lack of sleep. I couldn't sleep. I was always kind of hypervigilant. And then I was irritable. Everything bothered me. Everything was a big mountain when really it wasn't. And so I had to be able to figure out how to relieve myself of the stress, get myself out of the fight, flight, or freeze, and to get my engine running the way it needed to be, and then kind of move away from that, the overeating of the comfort foods.
Absolutely. And then again, in turn, for caregiver burnout specifically, the signs and symptoms can be very similar. When we're talking about not getting restful sleep, feeling incredibly tired no matter how much sleep you've gotten. You know, like Susan said, maybe it's loss of appetite. Maybe it's I'm eating just because it soothes me. Maybe it's my mind won't shut off at night. I deal with that quite a bit. Even now, if I'm stressed, you know, I can't get my brain to stop, especially if I know things are coming. If I know I have to prepare for a visit, or if I know I have to prepare for court, or if I just know tomorrow I know kiddo's going to be upset about this, I will stress about it and I will worry about it and I will do the worst case scenario in my own mind, which is not going to be beneficial for anybody. So, you know, it's just that really low drive sometimes to get things done because you're just assuming the worst is going to happen. It's really important to be aware of those signs, because stress, we all deal with it in some way. You're going to have it no matter what. You're certainly going to have it now, or if you are on this path. So be mindful of that. Be mindful of the fact that it's not about not having stress. It's about learning how you can best handle stress.
And don't you think too that sometimes it's not just about the negative again, but sometimes you've got 4 kids and you've got to be on. You've got to get this kid to dance, this one to then, and so you're doing so much that can cause burnout too. That you're just overwhelmed in a positive way. So just find that balance.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's not always the negative. Sometimes it's the good stuff too that can cause us to be a little overwhelmed.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And sometimes it's, I know that was one of the hardest lessons I learned, because I'm a yes man. If somebody asks me, I want to say yes because I want to please people. I want to serve people. I love to serve people. But sometimes I have to say, you know what, as much as I love book club, I can't do it right now because it's one more thing that takes me away from my family, or it's one more night I have to be prepared and plan dinners around it, or whatever it may be. And the same for my kiddos. Counseling is a wonderful, beautiful thing, but I've had kiddos come into my care that have been in counseling for 5, 6, 7 years nonstop. And they've never gotten a break. And they're like, I just don't know what to work on right now. I feel like I've talked to this issue to death. I've talked that issue to death. And they've said, can I take a break from counseling? And if they're in a good space, we do that, because that's okay. It's okay to say no sometimes to all the things. So just being mindful of that and being proactive versus reactive when it comes to your own well-being, so that you can then care for those kids. Okay, the first story is about an 8-year-old niece. Your 8-year-old niece came to live with you 3 months ago because your sister, your niece's mom, has chronic substance abuse issues and a neighbor reported abuse and neglect. Visits with her mom have been stressful. Your sister often misses visits or shows up late and expresses blame and resentment that her daughter is placed with you. She feels she should be able to come over often and has filed several false complaints to her social worker that you are not taking good care of her daughter. You are a single mom and have 2 daughters, ages 5 and 7. The issues with your sister have been disruptive to the family. You find yourself increasingly irritable and have been drinking more wine in the evening to relax. You are not sleeping well. So, we want to talk about a couple things. We want to talk about what signs of stress should be paid attention to, some things that you can do to practice good self-care, and then what protective factor categories do we see in this story.
I think the red flags definitely are the increase in alcohol consumption,
Absolutely.
And then also the inability to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Those are clearly the things we're seeing here. And I'm sure there's some. She talks about resentment and blame and stuff, and so that's an emotional charge there. So
Absolutely.
And I really think in this case, it's one of those advantages you talked about, Jackie, of having a social worker, is
Right.
get that social worker on your side. Let her be the person who intervenes in those visits
Absolutely.
and those accusations, so that you can take that stress off of you and you can be taking care of yourself, and let them absorb that during visitations and stuff. Not a lot we can do about her not showing up other than being aware and being ready to protect and help the child work through those types of things.
Absolutely, I agree.
And that way you're not giving the information. The caseworker can handle all that. That's their job, and they can handle all that. You don't even have to see your sister if you don't want to at these visits. And if that helps you, then do that. That's okay. It doesn't mean you don't love your sister or anything like that. That's not what it is. But it is saying that I got to take care of myself, and I can't get verbally beat up or emotionally beat up every time we do this. And that's okay. That's
Absolutely.
all right.
And that's what enables us to be able to take care of the niece, is when we're not spending our energy in working with her mom.
Right, and they'll protect her during the visit. A lot of times we're afraid because we think, oh, I got to be there, I got to protect her. So they will. They'll do it.
Yeah,
they'll do their job.
Yeah, absolutely. You can voice your concerns, raise your concerns, whatever it may be. And again, like Susan said, let the caseworker be the bad guy, because there's also there's already enough interesting and convoluted dynamics amongst the family, right? It already brings up enough. You don't need to necessarily bring up one more. Let the caseworker take on that role and take it off your plate. You don't have to manage that completely and alone, right? Know your village, use your village. So,
and I think that's one of the protective factors that we've talked about.
Absolutely.
Was the importance of those social supports to come in and take as much stress off of you as possible in this situation and allow you to put your energies where your energies need to be.
Absolutely.
With your niece.
And don't be afraid to say, I can't do this. These visits, this when I meet with my sister, I can't do it right now. So I need to step back, and I'm going to let you do this, and asking for that help and allowing it, taking it and receiving that help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate that. All right, so we're going to read the second story now. It's about your 15-year-old brother. Your younger 15-year-old sibling came to live with you when your mom was incarcerated again for theft and drug possession. Both of you spent time in and out of foster care growing up. You have a new job, have been dating your new girlfriend for the past several months, and didn't want your brother to go into foster care, so you stepped up when he called you. Your brother has been hanging out with a group of friends that you don't really care for. You know he is smoking and most likely experimenting with drugs and alcohol, which he will not admit. He has been cutting school on a regular basis. He becomes explosive when you confront him. You understand his life has been hard, but you made it through your teens and are doing well, and you feel he should appreciate you more and respect your authority. Your monthly expenses have gone up significantly since taking in your brother, and you are worried that you won't make rent next month if you don't figure something else out. Your brother is so difficult in the mornings that it has made you late for work several times, and you just got a warning from your boss. Every time your phone rings in the afternoon, your stomach twists and knots, and you worry what he has done now. I think, yeah, we all kind of, that resonates with us, because I personally have felt a lot of this in there. How about you girls?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So in this one, again, we want to talk about what signs of stress do we see? What are some things that the older brother could do to practice good self-care?
Well, definitely the phone ringing, because that one really isn't. I can remember if I looked down my caller ID and I'd see that it was a school, I'd be like, yeah. So, and there was a time or two I didn't answer because I just couldn't go there that day, So I'd call back later. I did call back, but I'd have to do, give it some time. So I think that's a big one.
Yeah,
afraid to answer your phone.
And I think that we're seeing a little bit of imbalance here. Maybe investing too much time in the brother and then what they're doing, and maybe letting some of our work go down a little bit, or the stress handling it in the work. And I think that's a sign of stress also, when we're not able to balance that.
So this is back to where we're talking about learning new strategies, learning how, taking this to a counselor or the caseworker. I would suggest highly that this brother who's parenting his now brother, now he's changed hats and roles and everything, so it's hard, that he get counseling so that he can get a strategy in place that I'm leaving in the morning on time.
Yeah.
And so this is what it's going to look like. And what do I do if he doesn't go, if he doesn't get ready for school? How do I handle that? Because somebody, who doesn't have a dog in the fight, who's trained, who can help give you ideas and stuff like that, those kind of behaviors, you need help with. And so I think that learning and talking to someone who has the skills to help you find solutions to these and put them into practice and stuff. And what can I do when he's with his friends and experimenting with drugs? How do I handle that? Because his older brother's not going to, he's going to need some kind of, how do I not punish that, but how do I give consequences for that and stuff?
Right.
And so learning how to do all those, he's going to need some help.
Right. I agree.
And I found that the social workers were the ones that could help me with that. They were the ones that were able to say, at 15 you shouldn't be doing this and you've got to be here, so I'm going to put these consequences. And I was able to say, gosh, I wish I could do it differently, but the social worker has said this is the consequence for that. And then finding those people that'll come and be at your house in the morning so that you can get to work again, saying yes to that help.
Yeah. And sometimes natural consequences are a part of that, and you have to have open and honest communication with your younger brother in this situation, and just be frank and transparent and say, I have to be to work on time. It's important because not only am I caring for myself, but I'm caring for you now as well. And it's important, that these are the things that we need to do. This is how I show responsibility. This is how I invest in things that I care for, which one of them is you.
It's a paradigm shift when you do that.
It is.
When you start to take back control, because now this kid is running this house.
Right.
And so when the brother steps up and he learns some healthy skills, and then we have that shift,
right.
Now he's back in control, and now the child is learning that he has to comply in a way and things like that. So it's healthy.
Yes.
It's healthy and it's healing for him to learn these skills and to,
Right. And when the younger brother is confrontational and loud and explosive, oftentimes kids will do that expecting the same out of you. And when you don't rise to that occasion, flip the whole script around, and you invite them to what you are doing, which is grace and understanding, healthy boundaries, and expectations of this is what is going to happen. This will be the discipline that I will follow through with if you cannot, abide by the rules that we have. And that's not a threat. That's not, rising and getting in their face and making it confrontational. It's inviting them along with, this is what I need. This is what we need to function. Please, let's find a way to make this happen. And if we can't, we'll reconvene, right? There may be natural consequences for that, but we'll wrap around again, and I will invite you back to it again, because we want him on the same page, right? We want a functional, happy, healthy, competent young man out of this. The whole idea behind this is relationship. You want to be closer to that child when it comes down to it. You don't want to cause divides.
We have a saying at Foster: connection and then correction.
Absolutely.
So we want to connect with them before we correct, because then it's easier on both of you.
Right.
And we'll teach you those skills, and the different trainers and things like that, and the different classes you'll take from here on out will teach you those kind of skills so that it comes natural, and then it becomes intuitive, like we were talking about. Okay, I know what to do here.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. That's great, ladies. You guys did great feedback. So when we talk about the protective factors in this case, what do you think we're seeing here with the resiliency, knowledge of parenting and child development, social connection, or concrete support? What do you see in this?
Definitely concrete support. He's going to have it.
I agree.
And I think knowledge too, learning to understand what trauma has done with this young man, and how you can relate with him, and the connection with before correction, to really reach out and get the knowledge that you need to be able to work with them.
Yeah. And like Jackie said as well, putting on a different hat, because it's not just brother anymore. It's essentially acting as a parent now as well. So, taking a step back and realizing what that is, and it's not just, complete leniency. You have to have healthy boundaries. You have to have some expectations, and that can be really hard sometimes for children, especially if they haven't had that before. So lots of grace to go along with that. So.
And I think that we need to remember too, for the 15-year-old brother, it's a shift for him too.
Absolutely.
Because he's now lost a brother who has now become a parent.
Absolutely.
And that's a tough shift to make too. So it's really important that we recognize where he's coming from too.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Absolutely. That was awesome, ladies. I appreciate all that insight. That concludes the two skill building exercises that I have. So I'm going to turn it back to Susan now.
I hope we haven't scared you too much. We've been talking a lot about stress
Right.
and kind of that
But here's
whole
why,
world.
because when it's going well, you don't need us to teach you
That's
anything.
right.
Right.
But
That's
when
right.
but when it hits the fan, that's when we step in and we want to give you those tools.
Exactly. So I just want to end with a couple of suggestions, okay, and how to manage and do this. Practice acceptance. Understand, don't get caught up in the blame game or the frustration game, the pity game. Look for those reasons that you made that conscious decision to bring this child. Reconnect with the reasons that you did that. Look for the silver linings. How are you building a better relationship with this child? How are you becoming stronger? Again, this is just being conscious and really looking into it.
Celebrate those good moments.
Absolutely. In fact, the small celebrations.
Yeah.
Look for those small things that are
Yeah.
changing and increasing. Don't wait for the great big one.
Yeah.
It may be a few years before
Right.
those come.
Oh my
Celebrate
gosh,
those small ones.
he got to school and I got to work
Right.
on time.
That's exactly
Yes,
right.
That's a big celebration.
Absolutely.
Take a moment, appreciate it.
And
Absolutely.
sometimes success doesn't always look like getting straight A's.
And
Sometimes,
if I'm your RPM and that happens, you get to work
Yep.
on time, call me. I'll celebrate with you.
yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Success may be
Absolutely.
he got out of bed today.
Yeah.
You know, success may be
Yeah.
he didn't cuss me out. Success may be there was no tantrum today when I asked him to do things. Success can be many things, so definitely
Success
celebrate
can be he said thank you.
that. Absolutely.
So
Exactly. Also, don't let parenting take over your whole life.
Yeah.
Remember to keep parts of those lives that you had before, whether that's friends, family, hobbies that you enjoyed, all those kinds of things. Make sure that you hang on to some of them.
Yeah.
And remember to fill your bucket,
Yes.
because you can't fill the bucket of the child if your bucket's not full.
That's right.
So we'd like to thank you for joining us tonight and for being part of our Building the Resilience for Kinship Families. We'd also like to really encourage you to take a look at the first training and really get in there as quickly as you can so that we can give you more tips and tricks and more ways to support you and your family as you do this very important work of taking care of your kinship families. Ladies, thank you.
thank you and good luck.
Thank you. Good
Yes.
luck.
Good
And
luck.
don't forget to call your RPM.
Yes.
We're here for you. We want to be here for you.
Thank you.